Of all the horses I have currently, Frankie is the one I've had the longest, so it seems fitting that we start with him. Frankie, or as we sometimes like to call him now, Frankie, is a 15-year-old 17-hand gelding. He was given to me as a 4-year-old after retiring from the track where he had a decent career. Training Frankie was one of the most frustrating yet rewarding experiences I've had with horses. He is very opinionated and can be very determined to get his way. It took the longest time just to get this horse to walk over a ground pole. For whatever reason, Frankie thought it was the end of the world and for many months simply refused to do it. Another one of his all-time famous tricks was pulling away from me to slam his body into the gate to pop it open so that he could leave the arena. He would do it on the ground or under saddle. It did not matter. There was one summer where I never rode that horse in an arena to avoid that problem. Quite frankly, it was a little scary because there's not a way to get through to Frankie until he changes his mind on his own. He is that stubborn. Through a lot of tears, patience, and wishing there was a way to give the horse a brain transplant, I eventually got him going better. He turned into an incredibly honest horse. He'd jump anything from anywhere. Frankie did a few shows in his life, going up to the 2-6 jumpers, but never did anything more than that. As frustrating as it all was with this horse, I wouldn't change it for anything because he's the reason I've gotten confident in my ability to ride or train any horse. It would take a lot to be more difficult than he was. Years ago, we found a bone cyst in his sesamoid that we were able to maintain for a long time and keep him sound jumping. Over the past few years, there have been some changes in the cyst as well as the development of arthritis, so Frankie is now retired from jumping and showing. I still ride him occasionally, but he is mainly used for flat lessons now. He is a great horse to teach an inexperienced rider how to do a lead change. His changes are very auto, so if you can even just keep him kind of straight, he'll do it for you. He's also great for lunge line lessons and no stirrup work. Okay, well, maybe not so much his trot because he is incredibly bouncy, but his canter is very balanced, so it's great for kids to drop their stirrups and develop their seat. He will keep doing lessons until he tells me he's done, and then he will retire with me and live out the rest of his days. I think he does love the kids, and I know they adore him, so I think he will always be happy doing lessons. It will just be a matter of when his body says no more. Although Frankie has matured a lot and let go of a lot of his opinions, he still has the occasional moment where his stubbornness comes back out. On very nice days when he is out with his buddies, he'll let you catch him, walk him to the gate, and then before you get him out of the pasture, he will pull away from you and run back to his buddies. He'll do it only a handful of times each year, and I've kind of just accepted it as part of his personality. He's changed a lot from who he used to be, but that stubborn streak is always going to be there a little bit. It's kind of just like this unspoken compromise we've reached. He's a good boy 95% of the time, but he still gets the occasional day to revert back to old behavior. As long as that's the only naughty thing he does, then we're cool. And honestly, everyone has days when they don't feel like working, and I think horses should get that too. Frankie's just one of those horses who will make his opinion known. He has anhydrosis, so I can always count on him wanting to be in the barn in the summer. He truly hates the heat and never wants to be outside on hot summer days. There have been times when he's gotten out of his pasture in the summer, walked himself into the barn, and put himself in the wash stall so I would hose him off. Because of the anhydrosis, he can only work early in the mornings or in the evenings when it's really hot out. Frankie has a big personality and never fails to make us laugh. He loves Twizzlers, playing in water, and the donkey. He's never really figured out how to pick up his left lead. He has to kind of like hop onto it. He sounds like a dying whale when he rolls. He loves cuddles, although he tries to pretend like he doesn't. He's got a big heart, and I know he'd do anything for me. Unless I catch him on a day where his opinion is different than mine, then maybe not. It took some time, but we've reached a pretty good understanding of each other, and Frankie has a home with me forever. Bacardi is a 12-year-old 16 one-hand thoroughbred gelding that I got off the track as a 5-year-old. He is my personal horse that I don't really let anyone ride. Riley has been on him twice, and she's the only other person that's been on him besides me since I've owned him. In 2016, Bacardi did the Thoroughbred makeover, but he didn't do very well there. The jumpers there are subjectively scored, so basically you're wanting them to go around like an egg horse, and that's definitely not Bacardi. The makeover might not have been his calling, but he makes a great speed horse because he is very quick. On the ground, he's a total puppy dog. He loves attention, cuddles, and scratches. He's the type of horse that will just follow you around in the barn with no halter or lead rope and just want to hang out. Under saddle, he's a little bit different. He's sensitive, quirky, and can get overwhelmed if you ask more than he's ready for. He needs a quiet, effective, and patient rider. Bacardi is an incredibly talented horse, and when his brain matures to match his physical ability, he will be unstoppable. At horse shows, he gets a little worked up in busy rings, but I think that's partly to do with something that happened to a mountain pasture one time. He had a galloping horse come straight at him and crash into him. It flipped Bacardi completely over, he had a seizure, and it fractured his withers. It was a scary thing to witness, and I know it was a lot scarier for Bacardi to go through. I think he still has the fear of that happening again in his head sometimes when there's horses moving past him quickly in schooling rings, so that's sometimes why he gets worked up about it. When he gets overwhelmed, he has the tendency to start going sideways. He used to do it a lot at home, but hasn't done it here in a very long time. He sometimes will still do it at a horse show, but I think it will go away if he starts competing consistently again and learns to relax more at horse shows. Bacardi's show name is Bacardi B. He was starting to do rated shows in the .9 jumpers and was ready to move up to the meters, but in 2020 he suffered a stifle injury that sent us back to square one. The injury was frustrating, and it was scary to have my top horse out with something that he may not recover fully from, but it turns out the injury may have been a blessing in disguise. My vet and I have said many times that it might have been the best thing that ever happened to Bacardi. The rehab program that he did made him very strong, and he's going better than ever. Right now, Bacardi is working on getting back into competing. Given how frazzled he can get, he's gone back down to the lowest level of jumpers he can do, and he'll slowly work his way back up as he gets comfortable at horse shows again. There's been a lot of ups and downs with this horse. He's high maintenance, the pickiest eater I've ever seen, and maybe slightly neurotic, but I love him more than anything. I have no intentions on ever selling Bacardi. He's my buddy, and I think we make a good team. I don't know where we'll end up, but we'll keep working our way back up the levels as far as we can go. Honestly, if I can just keep the horse happy and healthy, that will be good enough for me. Marco is a 13-year-old 13-3 hand grade gelding that I got in 2017. He was at a racetrack in Ohio, and I bought him sight unseen off of some jog video with a gut feeling that he would make a great lesson pony. He ended up being exactly what I hoped he'd be. A total kick ride with a steady trot and canter that is perfect for teaching beginners. Before I owned him, Marco was imported from Mexico, and at one point in his life he was a therapy horse. He had never jumped before, so that was something that I had to teach him. He doesn't have a ton of jump in him, but he's a great crossrail and short stirrup pony. He really doesn't have the capability to jump much over 2 foot. Marco has been a huge asset to my lesson program, and I can never thank him enough for everything he's done. He's taught countless kids to canter and jump and helped them through their first horse shows. Marco has packed so many kids around crossrails, and last year he was actually reserve champion in crossrails for the year. He doesn't have a show name, so he just shows as Marco, and honestly that's probably how it'll always be because at this point it would just feel really weird using anything else. Marco is the sassiest pony in the barn, but he's a total saint. He never holds a grudge, and he's very patient with every kid that sits on him. The kids don't always see how patient he is at first. To be honest, he's not a favorite of the very beginner kids until they start getting better, and then they love him. To the novice kid, Marco is difficult to ride. He has a motor if you can get him out in front of your leg, but a beginner, especially a child, isn't capable of doing that, so it makes it really hard for them to keep him going. He's also not super comfortable to ride. He has a short, choppy stride that is pretty bouncy. Couple that with the fact that he's extremely lazy, and a beginner has a really hard time keeping him moving until they get stronger and develop a better seat. For trainers, that's the ideal lesson pony to teach beginners. It's kind of nice to not worry if the pony is about to gallop away with a small child. But it can be frustrating for beginner riders because they think it's Marco not listening to them, but once they have a better understanding of riding, they realize what a saint Marco truly is to put up with all the bouncing around and them catching him in the mouth and every other little thing that lesson ponies have to deal with. Marco truly is a great teacher. When a rider really needs a confidence boost, Marco will always be there to take care of them. But when it's time for them to learn, he will make sure that happens. Although he can be a little on the naughty side and do things like drag you to food if there's any in his sight, Marco is a huge blessing and I'm forever thankful for him. He will never be sold and he will retire with me when the time comes, but hopefully that won't be for a very long time. Pablo is a 9-year-old 13-3 hand grade gelding that I got when he was 5. This pony. Oh, where to even begin with this pony. He's a handful. He thinks everyone exists solely to give him attention. He doesn't really have an understanding of personal space, nor does he really grasp the concept of self-preservation. He thinks everything is a toy, even if it's something that could hurt him. For example, we had someone weed eating by the fence of his pasture one time and every other horse stayed far away, but Pablo was right there poking his nose out at the weed eater to see if it was something that would be his friend. The weed eater didn't really work out as a great friend for Pablo, but he does have a best friend in Marco. They have what is probably a pretty unhealthy attachment to each other. The two of them have like this alliance with each other and they can't go out with any other ponies because they gang up on them and are honestly pretty mean. They can go out with horses, but ponies their own size, they bully. I've never seen an animal quite like Pablo. He really is something else. He never stops moving. He'll pin his ears when you walk up to him, even though he obviously wants attention. He constantly thinks he's starving, even though he's fat. He's a character for sure, and there's never a dull moment when he's around. There was a time when I wasn't the biggest fan of this pony because of how annoying he is. I couldn't wait to get him out of the barn. Over the past year or so, the little guy has really weaseled his way into my heart. He's at the point now where he's become a permanent fixture in the barn and it's highly unlikely that he'll ever leave. Pablo has come a long way in the almost 4 years that I've owned him. When he first got here, he was very green and had never jumped before. The first few times I let kids trot around on him, I just kind of held my breath. I wasn't entirely certain that he wouldn't take them for a little gallop around the ring. In 2021, Pablo started to show signs of maturity. Up until that point, Pablo was a sales project and Riley was the only kid that rode him. There was actually a time when Riley was a little scared of him because he is a lot of pony. He is thoroughly convinced that he is a Grand Prix horse, and back then he could at times be a little intimidating to green riders. He's chilled out quite a bit and did short stirrup all last year with Riley. Pablo has become invaluable in my lesson program. He has been a great teacher for beginners, helping them learn to trot, canter, and jump. I never thought I'd see the day where I fully trusted Pablo to canter and jump with kids that have never done that before, but I guess there was hope for the pony after all. In the show ring, he goes by Hot Rod, but the kids he teaches affectionately call him Pablo Diablo Little Devil. He really loves his kids and tries his hardest to take care of them. Pablo is way more annoying, but he's just as saintly as his buddy Marco. He's now a pony that I'd trust to go pack around a walk, trot, or cross rail kid. Pablo is usually the favorite over Marco for the beginner riders. Pablo has his own motor and he's much smoother than Marco, so he's quite a bit easier for them to ride. Pablo has a huge stride and a ton of scope and could easily do the large greens as soon as he has a consistent lead change. He's currently been in lead change boot camp and is starting to get the hang of it. Maybe one day he'll get to pony finals if I have a kid with the ability and willingness to put in the work to get there, but for now he's packing around kiddos and being a great teacher for them. Pablo will probably never stop being annoying, but since he's now a good boy for kids, I'm okay with it. He's a pony I'll definitely never forget. Honestly, I don't know how anyone could forget him. He really is a bit of a nut job, but it's hard not to love him. He's got a lot of heart underneath his crazy exterior, and I'm grateful he's in the barn. Geronimo is a coming 8-year-old 14 one-hand registered Pinto Arab cross gelding. When I got him almost 2.5 years ago, he was very skinny and practically feral. He was barely halter broke, wouldn't come in the barn, and had zero trust in people. A lot of time and energy went into gaining this pony's trust and getting him started under saddle. This is going to get all cheesy and sappy or whatever, and I hate it already, but we really do have a special bond. I love all of my horses and enjoy being around them, well, most of the time, but it's different with Geronimo. I feel completely content around him, and just being near him puts me in a better mood. There's just a different level of trust between us. Geronimo is definitely the golden child. He basically can do no wrong. But honestly, he is pretty perfect and tries really hard to do what is being asked of him, so he doesn't really do anything that would get him in trouble anyways. He does love to pull the flowers out of the flower boxes and try to eat them, but that's really the only kind of naughty thing he does. Right now, Geronimo is working on jumping, and hopefully at some point this year he can go to his first horse show. He'll probably start doing lessons occasionally when he's ready. He's quite lazy and has a great brain, so I think in time he could be really good for beginners. Riley has been on him a few times, and I'd like to start getting some of the other kids on him as well. Geronimo will never be sold. He completely has my heart, and I couldn't imagine him not being here. Kane is an 11-year-old 16 one-hand thoroughbred gelding that I got off the track when he was 5. There is no part of this horse that was meant to go fast. He had an absolutely terrible career on the track, winning a whopping $134. Kane is honestly like a 25-year-old quarter horse soul that was born into the body of a thoroughbred. In 2017, Kane did the thoroughbred makeover. Even with some pilot errors, he finished 10th in Hunters. I was very sick during the makeover that year, but it's one of my favorite memories with this horse. After the makeover, Kane, who shows by his jockey club name Elusive Wind, continued his career in the show ring and moved up to the 3-foot Hunters. He also started doing more lessons as well. Kane is the perfect example of why it's not fair to stereotype thoroughbreds. Even when he had only been off the track for a few months, he was always cool with trotting around on the buckle with children. In fact, I think that might be his preferred occupation. He was actually the horse Riley did her first horse show on, and he took the best care of her. As of recently, Kane hasn't been showing as much as he used to, but I would like to change that. I think he'd make a super children's hunter for one of the kids when they're ready to move on to showing horses. I would also like to give him a bigger role in my lesson program this year, but he's pretty much had the winter off, so he's got some work to do before a bunch of kids start riding him again. Kane is hardly ever called by his name anymore. He mainly goes by Monkey. He is very curious and playful and loves to be out with his buddies causing trouble. He doesn't walk normally. Instead of his left and right legs having 2 separate tracks, he makes both front legs walk the same track, so he's got a little sway to his walk. Kane has a forever home with me. When you find a horse with a brain like his, it's really hard to part ways with him. Aqua is an 11-year-old 15-3 hand thoroughbred mare that I got when she was 5. She came from the same racetrack that Marco was at, and I also bought her sight unseen off of some jog video. I got Aqua around the same time I got Kane, and they both went to the 2017 Thoroughbred Makeover together. Aqua didn't end up in the ribbons like Kane did, but she was much greener than Kane, and she was still very good regardless. After the makeover, Aqua transitioned to jumpers and she was doing really well until I had a bad fall towards the end of 2019 off of a different horse, and it really destroyed my confidence. She had some time off from riding and showing while I was working on getting comfortable on a horse again, and she just got back into the show ring last year. Showing by her jockey club name, Dig Blue Water, Aqua got back into the ring doing hunters again. I think mainly because that's the ring I feel safest in, and she's a horse that can do both rings, so I chose to go where I feel the most comfortable because at the time that's what I needed to get the both of us back to competing. If she shows again, she'd most likely go back into the jumper ring. Aqua is a tank. She has a ton of power and jumps hard. It's not easy to stay with her over fences. There's been times when I thought she was maybe gonna give me whiplash. Aqua is honestly kind of lazy to flat, but when there's a jump in front of her, it's game on. She knows exactly where she wants to be and will take you right to the jump. I have used Aqua for lessons occasionally, and she's always been very good for the kids. She's actually the horse one of the girls did their first jump on. I'm not really sure what this year holds for Aqua. I absolutely adore her, but the thought has been in my head to sell her to make it easier for me to pursue some other goals of mine. Nothing is officially decided yet, but there's a good chance she'll be listed for sale this year. Until then, I'll continue riding and maybe showing her. Aqua really is a cool horse. She's got a ton of ability and she's the chillest mare I've ever owned. I'm honestly not super sure that she's got the slightest clue she's a mare. Regardless of what I decide to do with her, I love the horse to death and will always make sure she has the best. Bits is a 9-year-old 17-hand thoroughbred gelding that I got off the track when he was 4. He was supposed to be the horse I did the 2018 Thoroughbred Makeover on, but things with Bits have never really went to plan. For the majority of time I've owned this horse, it's been one thing after another with him. The first 6 months, I couldn't do anything with him, not because of an injury, but because his feet were so terrible my vet and farrier didn't want him working because it was very likely that he would injure himself if he did work. After his feet were under control enough for him to finally be ridden, there was a bad case of rain rot on his belly right where the girth would go, many abscesses, and a handful of times where he managed to impale himself on mysterious objects that called for more time off. Bits really had a knack for keeping himself out of work. 2021 was really the first year Bits has been in a consistent program. It's been a real team effort to get this horse on track, but he's been going great recently. Now remember, Bits was supposed to be my 2018 makeover horse, but he just did his first shows over fences last year, showing by his jockey club name Looking at Bits. It might have taken a while to get there, but Bits is turning out to be a really nice hunter. He's a horse that could do all 3 rings and excel, but I plan to continue showing him in hunters. Once he gets a few more shows under his belt, he will be listed for sale. Bits and Bacardi are often confused because they do look very similar. It's easier to tell them apart when they're under saddle because Bacardi is very quick and Bits is, well, not. If they're not being ridden, the easiest way to tell them apart is Bits has a stripe and Bacardi has a star and a snip. Bits is bigger and more boxier looking and Bacardi is more petite. They both, however, love to play in water. I think Bits is the one that taught Bacardi what to do. In the summer, Bits splashes water out of their water trough and creates a giant puddle for them to roll around in and get as muddy as possible. It's not fun trying to clean them after that. It's not been an easy journey with Bits, but he's a really cool horse that is a lot of fun to ride, and if he can manage to keep himself healthy, he's got a very bright future. 2020 brought injuries to my two main lesson horses, leaving me in a bind trying to do lessons. At the time, Pablo was still a little nutty, so it never crossed my mind to use him. In desperation for lesson horses, I ended up purchasing two new ones, the first one being Cricket. Cricket is a 12-year-old 14 one-hand grade pony gelding that came from Georgia. I bought him off video without trying him, although since he wasn't located at a track, I had more to go off of than jog video. The hope was for him to be another Marco while I couldn't use the actual Marco and just be the saintly being that could tolerate floppy beginners, but Cricket wasn't quite that. Found that out the hard way when I put a more inexperienced rider on him and he immediately dumped her. Whoops. Don't get me wrong. Cricket is a very good boy, but Marco is 1 in a million, and horses that can tolerate what Marco tolerates are hard to come by. Cricket still made a good lesson horse. He just wasn't for a true beginner because he wants his riders to not be bouncy. He was great for advanced beginner and intermediate riders. He was willing to deal with a lot as long as you had developed some sort of a seat. Even with the new lesson horses, more bad luck came. A month or so after Cricket was here, we found a fractured tooth while his teeth were being floated. The tooth was fractured all the way to the gum line and needed to be surgically removed, so he went to hang out with my vet for a few days to have surgery. He had a great recovery, thankfully, because he wasn't exactly a great patient that would let us take care of the giant hole in his face the way we were supposed to. After some time off from his tooth removal, Cricket got back to lessons and made his debut in the show ring with us, showing us Jiminy Cricket. Riley showed him in cross rails and 2-foot, and Cricket eventually packed Bella around her first time showing 2-foot. Cricket really loved Bella, and I was looking forward to her showing him more, but the end of 2021 brought more bad news for Cricket, this time in the form of something less fixable. Cricket started jumping to the side when a rider would dismount, and was eventually diagnosed with kissing spine after months of trying to figure out what was going on with the pony. We're doing what we can for him, and he's been doing a lunging program in an effort to strengthen his back and get him back to where he's comfortable under saddle again. It's uncertain if our efforts will be successful, but if by some miracle they are, he will return to lessons in whatever capacity he's capable of. If he keeps telling us he's hurting, he'll find a home that can spoil him and give him a good life being fully retired. It's heartbreaking, especially now watching all of this video of him and knowing that it's unlikely he will return to this. Cricket has really left his mark on us. He's the sweetest boy when he's in the barn, but outside with his buddies, he's the orneriest pony ever. He's not always easy to catch, so I try to keep a breakaway halter on him, but he's a master at getting halters off. He's also managed to get the gate to his pasture off the hinges and set him and his friends free on more than one occasion. When Cricket gets loose, which seems to happen a lot, it takes hours to catch him. It's horrible. But Cricket's best skill is destroying blankets. He went through 4 blankets himself last year and ruined several blankets of the other ponies as well. No blanket is safe if it's within Cricket's reach. Regardless of what the future holds for Cricket, we all love him, and I will make sure he has a good life whether he's still at my barn or someone else's. Nelson is a 14-year-old, 16-hand quarter horse gelding that was bought in 2016 to be a lesson horse. His primary role was teaching beginners how to post, and if they were children, once they had posting down, they would move on to Marco to be set free from the lunge line. Nelson is very tolerant and extremely slow, so he was great for beginners to learn on. He would gladly walk around at a turtle pace all day with a child. Nelson is an extremely talented escape artist. He can get himself out of stalls, arenas, and like Cricket, knows how to get gates off the hinges and set the whole pasture free. Playing with feed pans is one of his greatest passions in life, second only to eating. His athletic ability is not quite what his ability to escape is. He could kind of do very small fences, but jumping was definitely not his calling. He tried his best, but he was never really going to be capable of doing more than cross rails. Despite that, he still had a big role in my lesson program, so him fracturing both front coffin bones in 2020 from stomping so hard at flies definitely hurt. It took 2 years and 3 separate attempts at rehab before I finally got this horse through a program and still sound. Things seemed like they were looking up for Nelson and like I may have an additional lesson horse soon, only for another issue to pop up a week after he finished rehab. But hey, at least we made it completely through a rehab program before we had another issue this time. If it is what I think it is going on, he will be retired and move to a home that can give him tons of attention and a happy life for the rest of his days. My vet hasn't seen him yet, so nothing is for sure. It could very well be an easy fix, but I have pretty unfortunate luck with horses, so I'm not counting on it. Either way, Nelson has taught many riders a lot of valuable lessons in his life, and if it's his time to retire now, then he absolutely deserves it. Luna is a coming 8-year-old 12-hand Welsh Cross mare that I got towards the beginning of 2021 as a project pony. She did have some experience jumping, but she was very green, so there was a lot of work to do with her to get her suitable for a kid to ride. Luna might be small, but she has a huge personality. She is probably one of the funniest ponies I've ever known. She is very social and wants to always be the center of attention. I learned the hard way just how much the pony dislikes being alone, and it's the reason she knows one of her worst but funniest tricks. One time she was the only pony left in her pasture and she got really mad. At first, she just galloped around screaming, and then she got smart. She found a way under the fence into the pasture next to hers that had horses in it. From that day on, she never forgot that she can get under the fence. It's now something she does multiple times a day, depending on which horses she feels like hanging out with and also which ones might have food. Showing by her registered name, FRF Red Moon, Luna has been to a few smaller shows and done really well. Horse shows are her ideal environment because there's tons of people there that think she's adorable and want to give her attention. Although slightly overweight, okay, probably more than slightly, Luna is a very nice pony. She moves and jumps great and is definitely capable of doing the small greens when she gets a lead change and some more showing experience. Because Luna is so fat, she has to come in while the outside horses are eating, otherwise she'll steal everyone's food and that's the last thing she needs. When she gets put back outside, she gallops down to where any leftover food might be and pushes everyone out of the way and frantically gobbles down whatever food she can manage to find. When she's cleared one pasture, she'll gallop under the fence to the other and just as frantically search for whatever leftovers she can find. Her world revolves around food, and I know it's probably the most devastating thing to her that she's the only horse we try to keep grain away from. Luna will be listed for sale really soon. She's been very good for all the kids that have ridden her lately, so it's time. She will continue her training with me and maybe go to a few more shows until she's sold. Darth Vader is our donkey, but according to Riley, unicorn, that we got in 2012 when he was around 8 years old. I'm not sure how tall he is, but he's probably around 11 hands. We found him when we were at a farm that breeds donkeys looking for one of our own. It was an interesting experience. We saw a bunch of donkeys that were either sold or not for sale, or if they were for sale, they weren't very friendly. And then the guy took us to this donkey that we all really loved because he actually wanted to be around us. We then find out that this donkey isn't for sale. It's not even the guy's donkey to sell. It was his neighbor's, so we had to steal him. Just kidding, I promise we didn't steal the donkey. The neighbor agreed to sell him, and that's how Darth Vader became ours. It was a toss-up on what to name him. My dad wanted Donkey Kong and my mom wanted Darth Vader. My mom, of course, won, and I, a then child, had no input because I wasn't paying the bills. Also, my dad still calls him Donkey Kong, so I'm not really sure he's accepted defeat. Darth Vader has been a very good boy. He is, of course, at times very stubborn because he is a donkey, but honestly, he's very sweet and well-behaved. The horses sometimes like to pick on him because he's the little guy, but if Darth gets mad enough, he can hold his own. He once bit part of the ear off of a horse that was annoying him. Although his buddies sometimes bully him, Darth is willing to look past that if he perceives something as a threat to his horses. Baxter was almost trampled multiple times by the donkey upon entering the pasture. Darth Vader really only comes inside to get his feet trimmed or in the case of very inclement weather, but sometimes when Darth is sick of being outside, he'll squeeze out of the gate when I'm trying to get a horse and go running into the barn. He is also completely terrified of his blanket. We don't even know if it actually fits him because he absolutely won't let it near him. This donkey has a forever home with us. We all love him very much. Zilla is no longer my horse, but I decided to include her in this anyways because she hasn't been out of the barn for very long and I feel like she still deserves a spot in this. She is a 12-year-old 16 one-hand paint mare. I got Zilla in 2020 about a week after I got Cricket. Zilla was intended to be a lesson horse for adults. I really needed a steady, balanced, kick-ride type horse for beginner adults and I was hopeful she could be that. Like I do with the majority of my horses, I bought Zilla off video without ever trying her, which is a bit riskier, especially when you're trying to find a certain type of horse like I was in this case. She ended up being exactly the type of horse that was great for beginners, lazy and not going anywhere unless you are really sure that you are. Things with Zilla were great in the beginning. She could do up-down lessons on the lunge line with the littles or be something safe and reliable for an adult to lesson on. She was really catching on to jumping and I was optimistic that I finally had a solid lesson horse for adults. Unfortunately, Zilla's feet were in pretty bad shape when I got her and it ended up catching up to her. I started having a lot of issues keeping her sound. My vet looked over this horse thoroughly. We x-rayed her because navicular was a concern, but there was nothing wrong with the horse other than the shape of her hoof and that can only be solved with time. It took many months, but my farrier got Zilla's feet looking much better. There was still a ways to go, but they were significantly better and my vet said she was okay if I tried jumping Zilla to see how the horse felt. The first time jumping Zilla again, she was fine. She didn't get sore after. The second time I tried doing a little more and Zilla said no. I started having major doubts about what exactly Zilla would be able to return to. What I was wanting from her was I think going to be too big of an ask. At that point, it just wasn't worth it to me anymore to try and fight to have the horse be sound jumping. It's been a rough road with horses the past few years. I've had tough break after tough break and it's been very exhausting. All I'm really trying to have are some dependable lesson horses and it's just not working out. The day I was going to start finding a better, easier situation for Zilla, the perfect opportunity presented itself and I couldn't say no. Zilla went out east to hopefully be a good therapy horse. She has a really great home with a wonderful owner at a beautiful facility and I know she'll be so much happier with a less physically taxing job.